Welcome back to my channel. Today we are diving into the dark side of history and exploring the grim tale of a noble woman whose thirst for power may have led her to commit unspeakable acts. They called her the Blood Queen of Hungary. This is the terrifying legend of Elizabeth Báthory, a Hungarian countess who was rumored to have dipped herself in the blood of young girls. Some sources say she did it for fun, while others claim it was to maintain her beauty. But whatever the reason, the number of people she allegedly killed is staggering. They say she murdered up to 600 young women in the 16th century. So let's delve deep into the life of this enigmatic aristocrat, separating fact from fiction and trying to uncover the truth behind the monstrous allegations made against her. Are these claims nothing but sensationalized lies? Or could there be a grain of truth hidden beneath them? Let's dive into the murky depths of history and find out. Elizabeth Báthory was born on August 7, 1560, into a world of wealth, privilege, and power. As the daughter of Count Ferenc Nadasdy and Countess Anna Losonci, she grew up in a noble household that held significant influence in Hungarian society. The year was 1560, and Europe was a continent steeped in tradition and hierarchy. Elizabeth's upbringing would have been one of luxury and refinement, with an emphasis on religious piety, courtly manners, and the arts. At the time, education for women was not as widespread as it is today. But Elizabeth was a curious and intelligent child, and she would have received instruction in subjects such as religion, reading, writing, and music. She also would have been tutored in the intricacies of court life, learning how to behave in the presence of lawyers, how to hold a conversation with grace and charm, and how to navigate the complex social rituals of the era. Moreover, as the daughter of a noble family, Elizabeth would have been well versed in the laws and customs of her society, particularly those pertaining to land ownership, inheritance, and the rights and duties of the nobility. She would have also been trained in the art of diplomacy, learning how to negotiate and mediate disputes, and how to build alliances and maintain networks of influence. All in all, Elizabeth's upbringing would have provided her with a solid foundation in the arts and sciences, as well as the cultural norms and values of her time. However, she would have also been well aware of the constraints placed upon women in a patriarchal society and the limitations placed on their opportunities for education and personal growth. Nevertheless, despite these challenges, Elizabeth would have strived to make the most of a situation and use her intelligence and wit to carve out a place for herself in a man's world. In 1575, when she was just 15 years old, she was married to Ferenc, the fourth Count of Exton-Chate. This union was not merely a coming together of two individuals, but a strategic alliance between two influential noble families in Hungary. The event would have been celebrated with great pomp and circumstance, with festivities lasting for days, if not weeks. Guests from all over Europe would have attended, eager to witness the union of two of the most prominent families in the kingdom. The wedding ceremony itself would have been a grand affair, held in a magnificent church and officiated by the highest-ranking members of the clergy. The bride would have been adorned in the finest garments, her head crowned with an elaborate headdress and her body adorned with expensive jewelry. The groom, too, would have been the picture of elegance, attired in fine clothes and bearing the symbols of his noble rank. The reception would have been held in a grand hall, decorated with tapestries and banners bearing the family crest of the newlywed. Food and drink would have flowed freely, with musicians and dancers providing entertainment for the guests. Elizabeth and Ferenc would have danced together at the center of a crowd of nobles, marking the beginning of their life as man and wife. After the celebration, the newlyweds would have retired to a luxurious bedroom, richly decorated and furnished with the finest fabrics and antiques. It would have been a sanctuary for the couple, a place where they could relax and enjoy the fruits of their union away from the prying eyes of the public. In the following days and weeks, there would have been many parties and celebrations in honor of the newlyweds, each one a testament to the importance of the union between the two noble houses. Elizabeth and Ferenc would have traveled from town to town, meeting with their subjects and solidifying their place in the hearts and minds of their people. All in all, the marriage of Elizabeth and Ferenc would have been a resounding success, cementing the bond between two influential noble families and setting the stage for a lifetime of shared power, privilege, and prestige. And so the legend of the Bloody Countess began. Over the next few years, Elizabeth gave birth to 3 sons and a daughter, seemingly living a normal life for a noble woman of the time. However, behind closed doors, rumors began to swirl about the treatment of servants in her household, with whispers of mistreatment and disappearance circulating among the townspeople. By the year 1600, Elizabeth and her husband were living in their castle in Chates, now known as Chates Castle. The sprawling estate was said to have been the site of some of the most heinous atrocities committed by the Countess, with many believing that the castle itself was cursed. Despite its beauty, tragedy, and darkness seemed to follow its halls. But what exactly happened within those 4 walls? According to the legend, Elizabeth became obsessed with the idea of eternal youth and beauty, and came to believe that the blood of young girls could help her achieve it. She allegedly kept young girls as slaves in the castle, subjecting them to horrific experiments and torturing them in the most brutal ways imaginable. The castle was reportedly filled with cells and dungeons where the girls were locked up before being brought to Elizabeth for her pleasure. Some accounts claim that Elizabeth would dip bread in the blood of her victim, while others say that she would cover herself in their blood as part of a ritualistic bath. The girls were not just killed for sport. However, Elizabeth was also motivated by a desire for power, and she believed that by draining the blood from innocent maidens, she could transfer their life force to herself, making her stronger and more cunning. One of the most disturbing aspects of the legend is that Elizabeth was not alone in her quest for eternal youth. She had accomplices, including her husband and several members of her own family, who assisted her in carrying out her gruesome activity. Together, they formed a ring of blood drinkers who reveled in the pain and suffering of their victim. It's important to note, though, that much of what we know about Elizabeth's activities comes from sensationalist pamphlets written by her enemies, as well as from the writings of historians who were not present during her lifetime. There is very little concrete evidence to support the claims made about her, and many historians believe that the true story of Elizabeth Báthory has been lost to time. Enter the investigator. The news of Elizabeth's horrific activities eventually reached the ears of King Matthias II of Hungary, who ordered an investigation into her behavior. Soldiers were sent to her castle to search for evidence of her crimes, and what they found was truly horrifying. They discovered a secret chamber filled with torture devices, blood-stained instruments, and chains. In addition, they found a number of girls chained to walls, some barely alive and others already dead. Although the soldiers were able to gather enough evidence to arrest Elizabeth, her accomplices were never brought to justice. This was likely due to their noble status, as well as their connections to the royal court. Elizabeth was arrested and taken to Buda, the capital of Hungary, where she was held in a small room in the royal palace until her death. The end of the Bloody Countess. Elizabeth was never put on trial for her alleged crimes, and the details of her imprisonment are unclear. However, it is known that she spent her final years confined to a small room with only a slit for food, unable to see anyone except for her close family members. She died in 1614, having never admitted to her crimes or shown any remorse for her victim. Although Elizabeth's body was never recovered, it is believed that she was buried in the family vault in the village of. As the centuries passed, Elizabeth's legend grew, and she became known as the Bloody Countess of Hungary, or the Vampire of Transylvania. Her story has been romanticized and fictionalized in books, films, and television shows, and she has become a symbol of the evils of aristocracy and the dangers of unchecked power. But whether or not Elizabeth Báthory was truly the blood-obsessed monster she is made out to be is still a matter of debate among historians. While there is no denying that she lived a life of privilege and power, there is also no concrete evidence to support the claims of blood drinking and ritualistic killings. Some historians argue that the stories of her atrocities were exaggerated or fabricated entirely, driven by political and religious motives. Others suggest that while some of the claims may be true, they were likely the result of a culture of violence and brutality that was commonplace at the time. Ultimately, the truth of Elizabeth's story may never be known, leaving us to wonder whether she was a victim of circumstance or a truly evil and depraved individual. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the dark path. If you enjoyed this episode and want to learn more about other historical figures, please like and share. Your support helps bring these stories to a wider audience and keeps the macabre history alive. Until next time, stay curious and keep asking questions.